Welcome to the Mostly Pod Out at Night. Mostly, I'm Graveyard, joined by my co-host Salem.
Hello.
This is episode 90 of our weekly All Things Horror podcast. In our first ever film art style episode, we journey into the world of stop motion animation. This method of animation and its use in film for monster effects go back almost to the dawn of the medium. But when CGI came around, it lost much of its appeal to Hollywood and became a labor of love for those still involved and moved forward with the medium. And we are looking at newer films that are keeping the spirit alive. Granted, one of them was 30-ish years in the making.
Yeah, I actually looked it up, and yeah, I guess the first scenes were filmed in 1987.
Yes, I think while he was working on RoboCop 2, they said.
Right. Right.
Yeah. This was spurred on by the new movie Stop Motion that came out this year. And finally came to streaming, so we're able to watch it, and we look back on other horror movies that dealt with stop motion animation. As we've discussed before, that kind of became relegated to children's movies for the most part, right? With popularity of Nightmare Before Christmas, and of course probably a lot of Tim Burton stuff as well. So it's nice to see that it's still alive and gruesome now more than ever. We are looking at stop motion, but we are also starting off with The Wolf House and Mad God, made by, that was, I believe, Phil Tippett, right?
Yep.
His labor of love that guy spent a lot of time on. We'll start off with The Wolf House, which came out 2018, I believe.
Sometime between 2018 and 2020. I don't know. The dates kept changing. I'm assuming probably 2018 when it released in its original country.
Yes.
I think it was 2020 when it released up here.
Yes. And we'll just say, interesting enough about this movie is it's in Spanish and German.
Right. I mean, yeah, obviously it's subtitled, but yeah, if it's not subtitled, you'd have to understand both languages to know what's going on in the movie.
Yeah. And for most of these movies, just because these are more of a visual medium, and there's not necessarily a whole bunch of story we can always explain in detail, we'll do our best to go over it. But yeah, essentially The Wolf House is kind of starts off as a propaganda film of the colony, showing, hey, we're releasing this to you, showing that we're not so bad. And essentially we are introduced to Maria as she's escaping the wolf running through the woods, and she comes upon a house that is inhabited by two pigs. And she cuddles with them and says, hey, I won't eat you. I will keep you safe from the wolf. And we start going through progression of how she is dealing with being trapped inside the house with the wolf kind of speaking to her. The wolf does speak in German, and she replies back to it in German, but when Maria is talking to the pigs, she's speaking in Spanish. This does take place in Chile, and we'll get into Chile. We'll talk a little bit about the real life backstory of the inspiration for this movie as we get to it. But essentially we are really gifted the full-on making of a stop-motion movie, right? Usually they make it so you don't see the strings, you don't see the movement, you don't see anything, so it looks like very fluid. This style used for The Wolf House is pretty interesting because you see how they do everything. They see the buildup of from the armature to the skin to the different painting styles to everything. You see it all except the hands, but you see how everything's built. It's that type of stop motion, almost like claymation. Like if you watch the old Gumby where he's just a puddle and he slowly builds his way back up, that way you see that entire process is the best analogy I have for it.
Right. Well, yeah. There's just essentially two different kinds. One is that kind, and the other is just like paint on a wall.
Yeah.
That kind of tells the story as if it like a moving picture, but it's done with paint, stop motion style on a wall.
Right. So if they're like walking down a dark hallway with light coming through windows, you'll see the character will be there as you said, the paint will go from the right across left to show shadows and contours and passing of time even with that. So really interesting way of doing it. But the story is Maria starts taking care of the pigs, and she eventually names them Pedro and Anna, right?
Anna, yes.
Anna. And here's where it starts to get a little disturbing. They start turning more and more human-like after giving them names. Like, they start kind of playing fetch with the ball, but grow hands to throw the ball around. And for one Christmas, she gives them clothing. And eventually they kind of morph into humans. But they are mute because they're still kind of pigs, right? And it just kind of goes throughout, I don't know, indeterminate amount of time. And Maria's talking about like, the wolf is still out there. She's, talking about how she can't go outside, how Pedro and Anna can't go outside either because the wolf will get them, and I will keep you safe. Eventually, they are gifted with a voice. Birds essentially fly into their mouths and help them speak. Anna is very talkative. Pedro is said to be smart, but just slow with his speech. Eventually, we get some more back and forth between the wolf and Maria. And enough time has passed that they kind of run out of food. And eventually she finds out, is woken, Maria is, because Pedro and Anna are going to eat her because there's no more food. So it gets really, really dark at this point in time, tied up, ready to eat her. And then Maria prays to the wolf to come save her and to come eat Pedro and Anna. And he does. And then she makes her way back to the wolf in the end, because he does come save her, and she goes back. And I'll kind of get into the backstory from what I was reading about this movie. Is it's about a colony, almost like a cult, from Germans that fled Germany during World War II and moved to Chile. And essentially the back history of it is more gruesome, where they kind of enslave the native people there. They put them into camps. They try to essentially turn them German. And it is all kind of like a propaganda style of saying, hey, we're not that bad guys. We are here to protect you. And that's the underlying tone that is there. So this is a metaphor for what actually happened in the 1950s with German, fleers.
Right. Yeah. But if you watch it blind,
Yeah.
without knowing that ahead of time, it comes off as like Nazi propaganda.
Yes.
Almost, where you're like, okay, I know a lot of Nazis went to South America after World War II. Like this movie is really playing like like these savage people, literally calling them pigs.
Yep.
Like are then turned white by this lady, and that somehow makes them like civil and like able to like be a normal like person essentially.
Right.
And then at the end they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna eat you, which is, I mean, bizarre. But yeah, if you watch it without knowing what's going on, it's like, what is this? Is this some kind of like white supremacist propaganda? This is disturbing.
I mean, it kind of is, because that's the idea, is that it was the colony releasing, saying, hey, we are the good guys. You will not survive without us.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, knowing that now, I get it. I get what they're trying to say with the film, but like not knowing that, that's what it comes off as.
Yeah. Like I said, I only read up about it. I'm like, I was just looking it up just to see more about it. I'm like, oh, based on real events from like 1952. I go, what? Like, what real events happened in 1952 Chile that I don't know about? And
well, yeah. Immediately my mind went to Nazis being in South America. So I'm like, okay, this has got to be some kind of like weird Nazi propaganda how we got here.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so it's a very visual art form. Overall, like I said, the story's not that deep, and it's just a lot of world building and scene building between shots, essentially, right? We see
Right.
that entire process. So a lot of it is a short movie too, about like what, hour and 2 minutes. It's a
Yeah.
lot building up the scene and the atmosphere with not a whole lot of dialogue, I would say.
No, it's more of a visual medium for sure.
Yeah. I'll just go on my first thoughts is, yeah, I mean, this was first off, I didn't know this was going to be in Spanish and German when we picked this. Because I didn't know anything about this movie. We just knew that it was kind of stop motion horror geared towards adults, right? I did like the style. It is neat to kind of see all that background and, like, you know, the hay for hair and the coloring and how everything looks to it. It is, I don't want to say difficult to follow, but I had an issue just maybe as the angle of my TV, kind of reading the white subtitles because there's a lot of white on the screen. But I knew that subtitle version of it is going to be the best version of it because you're going to get the best translation as opposed to a dub version. Like I said, it's just interesting because it alluded to something that happened in history in Chile that we don't know about necessarily. So it's interesting to see the other cultural take of it because it is from Chile, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So like I said, it was just interesting to see a different country's version of stop motion and the stories they are telling with it. What was your first thought?
Oh yeah, well, my
Yeah.
first thought was it's Nazi propaganda.
Yeah.
So you go ahead and go on your high points.
Like I said, high points is the artistic style. Like I said, we're used to seeing this fluid stop motion without seeing really behind the scenes. Like if you ever want to see how they shoot the scene, there's always, like with the DVD extras, they'd show you, you know, here's how we animated this one shot, right? So it was very artsy, like a foreign film festival artsy style, which was interesting to me. And it did have, for being a not realistic looking puppets, still disturbing, especially with the pigs growing hands and kind of just like you can see them turning human, but like pig heads and like human bodies. I like that too. Those are my highlights. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I for sure I like the art style. I mean, it was like I said, it was a bit off-putting at first, you know,
Yeah.
seeing like all the foam and the wood and the tape and all that stuff, and you're like, wow, are they just being really lazy, or is this just like part of their process? You know, I was kind of trying to figure it out at first, but I mean, it's just part of their vision that they had for it. You know, they're just kind of the style that they were going for. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I mean, the way that they did the paint stuff was pretty cool. I mean, they like painted over like everything in the room, you know, including like, you know, paintings on the walls and clothes
Right.
and furniture. Like they painted over everything to like make the scene change, which I mean, yeah, it was odd but interesting. Like I said, yeah, it's pretty original. I haven't seen anything similar to that before. It was cool. I mean, I liked how they had the multiple styles in there. You know, like they kind of mixed and matched and went back and forth. Like even the different like stop motion animation ones. Like sometimes it was like paper mache, sometimes it was like clay. You know, sometimes it was just paint. I mean, it seemed like there was a lot of different styles kind of like thrown in there.
Right.
But it ended up being interesting. It was fun. I'll call it the scene with the candles. I thought was pretty cool. Where they were like kind of like popping in and melting.
Yeah, and
coming
the
back
noises with it. Yeah.
Right. I thought that was probably my favorite part with how they were doing it in their style. I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, just seeing them form and then melt, and seeing scenes come into focus as things are slowly being built. But like one person will be built first, and they'll be doing stuff while the other ones are being built up. It was, odd but interesting for sure.
Yeah. What's your low into your low points?
Okay, there was several times where the Maria person. Have you ever seen that? It's always on the list of like the creepiest videos on the internet. The I Feel Fantastic video of like the mannequin that sings.
Yeah.
Several scenes where she looked exactly like that creepy doll. It was off-putting because I've seen that too many times. The bugs, I don't know why they have like paper mache stop motion bugs all over in this, but I did not like it. Again, I mean, I didn't understand either language. I was listening to subtitles, but I could tell that different languages were being thrown out. I'm like, okay, that's German, and that's definitely Spanish. Like, what language are you supposed to speak to watch this movie?
Right.
Yeah, I was very, very confused at that. And again, the whole like, the end goal is to turn the native pigs white, which I felt was a little heavy-handed. But again, this is before I knew the history of everything. But I was like, wow, this is getting deep.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously it was supposed to be that way. It's Nazi propaganda being shown, for its ridiculousness, and that's okay.
Right.
What about you?
Obviously Nazis. And yeah, it is, I would say it is a jarring thing to watch first, like without knowing where it's going. It you're right. It was off-putting. Like, okay, what are they doing? Like kind of like the intro of her going to the house. Like, okay, it's paint, right? Here's a black door, and let's fill it in and shade it in, and then all the colors to make the shape of Maria, and then it pops, and then it's just like next scene. I feel like they could have done without necessarily all the scene building that we did get. It seemed to take a very long time. Like, you see all the stuff like when like Pedro's in the toilet and Maria's sitting there, and it takes like 5 minutes for them to get built, and like boom, destroyed, next scene.
Right.
Because it just felt like it was a big build up to something major, and it's just like, oh, he's just taking a shit.
Well, maybe they put that in there to make the thing like an hour and 10 minutes long or whatever it was. Because I mean, without that, it might not have. It was probably only been like 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah, that's really, and the language stuff is, yeah, the only way you're going to really watch it is with subtitles or know both German and Spanish.
Right. Or if you're watching the German version, is just the Spanish subtitled, and vice versa if you're watching the Spanish version. Like, I was like, how the fuck? What would you have to know to watch this movie?
Yeah. And I, like I said, once again, Nazis. That terrible, terrible backstory of what really happened there is just gross.
Right.
So we're doing number of gross puppets out of 10 because there are gross puppets really in all of these. Maybe not the Wolf House in comparison, but like I said, the pig human hybrid was disturbing.
Yeah, for sure.
So number of gross puppets out of 10. I said for me, for this one, it was a decent movie. Definitely not like the other two. And maybe it's just a cultural thing, but I will give this. I mean, will I watch this again? No. I have no desire to watch again. So I will give this a 6 gross puppets out of 10. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right around there. Yeah, I mean, it was good. It was interesting. Yeah, I don't want to watch it. It was an experience for sure, but yeah, not something that I would put in my rotation. So I'll see. I'll put it at a 5.
At 5?
5 gross puppets out of 10.
That's fair. Like I said, if you like, stop motion, if you like artsy stuff and some like deep lore of Nazi propaganda, then watch this movie. I mean, we can never describe it well enough to anyone listening. You have to see it for yourself, just for the art style, if nothing else. All right. So next up, we have the one and only Mad God. I know you have a story with this one too.
Yeah, I kind of, sort of. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be any. You know, call anybody out or anything. But, yeah, Mad God is as we talked a little bit in the earlier parts of it here, has been Phil Tippett's kind of labor of love since 1987. And he was, working at it in his spare time because he was very, very busy at that time. That was like the height of his career, right?
Yeah.
And then Jurassic Park came out, and then he kind of went like, oh no. And then, he was kind of scrambling. I think a lot of, the wind got taken out of his sails at that point. And it was very harder and harder for him to work on it. So essentially he had a lot of stuff done. He had a lot of, like the puppets were already made. He had the backgrounds and all that stuff was already there. Cause he's got, huge warehouse, places to build these things. Cause he's Phil Tippett. Right.
Right.
And he had all this stuff still sitting there, but obviously he had no time to work on it. And it was kind of like a bunch of, he like teaches or mentors, up and coming artists and stuff. And there's been kind of a resurgence in stop motion animation, recently, maybe like, I don't know, hipster resurgence. I don't know what you want to call it, but people like going back to like the old way of doing things and then trying to like make it fresh and new, which is, again, working out for stop motion. We've had, some good stop motion animation stuff come out recently. Adult oriented stuff. It's pretty, good stuff. Anyway. They saw this stuff that he did back in the old days because he was, showing it and stuff like that. And they're like, dude, you got to finish this. Like, like you're getting old. You're like, close to like retirement and stuff. Like this is something, this is great. This needs to be completed. And he's like, well, I don't have time or money. So they were working on it, pro bono, just voluntarily doing it. And I don't know. I think the last movie in this list kind of downplays how difficult it is to make a stop motion animation film.
A little bit, yeah.
It's not just one person in a night making a scene. Like it is literally, it takes like years, like, I mean, you like a month. I forgot what the calculation is, but it's like a week for like, I don't know, 5 seconds of time or something. And it's like ridiculous. It takes a ridiculous amount of time, effort, and energy to get it done. And again, people volunteering in their spare time to get this done, it was still going to take another 20 years.
Right.
So, being the younger hipster crowd that they were, hey, let's do Kickstarter. So, they did a Kickstarter. It did really well. Mad God 1 did really well. They did it in 15-minute increments. So Mad God 1 was like the first 15 minutes. Mad God 2 is the next 15. Mad God 3 was the next 15. And they did it. They got a lot of money for it. They had the money to like, produce it. And they did all 3 of those instances. And then after that, I don't know quite what happened, but I know they made some kind of deal with Shudder because Mad God is like a Shudder exclusive.
Yeah.
So at some point they made a deal with Shudder to where they gave them the money to make the last 40 minutes. Because I think it's like a total of like 85 minutes. So they gave them the money to make the last 40 minutes and then it became a Shudder exclusive.
Right, but you did kickstart it.
I did. Yeah. The Mad God 1, I was on that Kickstarter. I did get it. Mad God 2, I was on that Kickstarter. I never did get my my copy of Mad God 2. I don't want to get too bit into it. I know it wasn't Phil Tippett that was running the Kickstarter, so I know it's not his. I'm not blaming Phil Tippett. Whoever was running that Kickstarter kind of screwed me, but I won't get too far into that. But I never did get my second one, so I never did kickstart the third one because obviously I never got the second one. But I still do have I have a Blu-ray copy of Mad God 1, which is the first 15 minutes of the movie when that came out before the rest of it came out. So I still have that, so I can still say I supported it before it came out. But
right,
yes,
that's kind of alluding at. Like you like Phil Tippett enough to have kickstarted this project.
Oh yeah,
right?
I've loved Phil Tippett. I mean, when I was a kid, I first heard of Phil Tippett in Star Wars, of course, because I was a huge Star Wars nerd, and everything that he's done after that, I was like, oh, that's Phil Tippett. That's super cool because he did, RoboCop, I mean, like a bunch of other stuff that I watched and loved at that time period. Like he did all that stuff.
Right.
It was great. Yeah. So yeah, I've known him and followed him. So yeah, as soon as I heard about that, I was like, oh, this is great.
Yep.
Here's my money. But yeah, so Mad God, I'll get into the actual movie now. I rambled enough. I think it officially released at, I think, what, 2022?
2022.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it was like pandemic time. I mean, again, this is a visual medium. There's not really much I'm going to be able to tell you story wise, but
I mean, other than there's no dialogue.
right, yeah, there's no dialogue in this whole film. There's some baby crying, like,
And some moaning. And
yeah,
some moaning.
yeah, and that's it, and a lot of sound effects, but there's no actual sound effects, dialogue. But okay, so it starts off like there's a character called the Assassin, right?
Mhm.
And he's kind of dressed like I don't know, like a World War II era like commando or something, right?
With like the gas mask. Even.
Right, yeah, right. So like he comes down from the sky in like a, I don't know what you call it, like a diving bell, right?
Yeah, it's a diving bell.
Right, it's like a diving bell that's coming from the sky, and it goes through multiple different layers of, I don't know, yeah,
Hell.
kind of, sort of. It's like, layers of like whatever, different worlds, different realms, and he goes through a bunch of them just through with the diving bell till he eventually hits the ground, and then he has this map, and he's following this map and exploring, and he sees a bunch of things. There's these I'm only describing this process because it is how they get the gross puppet out of it, but there's like these giant people that are being electric chaired, and they're like shitting through their chair
Yep.
into like the funnel into a big machine. The big machine presses the shit into people.
Yes, they make shit people. Yeah.
Shit men. They're literally called shit men because
Yeah.
in the when I got my rewards for Mad God, they gave me a bunch of postcards,
Uh-huh.
and one of the postcards says, "The shit men cometh." And it's a picture of the shit men. So yes, they are called the shit men. That is their official name from Mad God. But yeah, and then they basically, like, these shit men are like the whipping slaves of every other being in this underworld. Like the other beings are like, they're not humans. I don't know what they are. They're some kind of bizarrely bulbous monster things. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, we see them all getting tortured and smashed and destroyed. Like, again, there's no thought for like their lives. They just get killed all the time. That's like their purpose is getting killed, it seems.
It's like Mr. Bill levels
Right.
of being killed.
Right, yeah. Like, yeah, they're there, they do all the work, but like the work is dangerous. They all die, and they constantly die, but they're constantly being recreated from this shit. It's you gotta see it. It's very bizarre. So anyway, so this assassin gets down further to where he finds these like mountains of suitcases, and just like the suitcase that he has in his hand.
Yep.
And then he basically opens the suitcase, and it's a big bomb, and he sets the timer on the bomb, and then gets captured by this, like, I don't know, wire monster thing.
Yeah.
And the bomb fails to go off, and then we, basically see that all those suitcases were other assassins that had come down and failed to set this bomb, which is the first, I guess, glimpse that we have into how many times this has gone through. So he gets captured. He goes back to like this medical facility to where they like strip off all of his clothes, and they cut him open, and they like start tearing out his guts. And it's like, at first it's like
coins,
yeah.
keys.
Yeah, it's like, at first it's like guts and blood and jam coming out, and then it's like coins and necklaces and bracelets, like treasure, and then it's like metal parts and stuff, and then it's like they start pulling out these big worm things, and then it pull out one worm thing, and then the worm thing's alive and crying like a baby. And so the nurse takes the baby and goes walking down the hallway, right?
Yep.
Then we cut to I don't know, up in the sky, who knows, but it's like this creepy guy with really long fingernails who's an actual human. Yeah, this is a human person. Really long fingernails and toenails, and it seems to be the only person there. I think he's credited as Last Man. So he basically, starts the process again. He gets another map, only this time the map is made out of leather instead of paper, because I guess the paper one fell apart.
Oh, it was disintegrating every time he looked at it.
Right.
Yeah, the assassin
So,
was, yeah.
so they made one out of leather so that it won't fall apart. They give it to another assassin who looks identical, pretty much. There's a little bit of difference, color changes, but that's about it. They give him that map. He gets to the diving bell. He goes down. He lands in a different spot. He tries the bike falls apart, finds a dirt bike, drives for a while, it dies. Then he finds like a old-timey World War II car thing. When he basically drives through battlefields, drives down this long spiraling thing. He gets down to the end of that, and then he gets killed. I don't remember what happens to him. Whatever, but yeah, so he ends up in the maze or whatever it is, and then he gets down at the end, and then he gets killed before he can set his bomb or whatever. And then we get kind of a weird flashback to then it cuts to back to the baby.
Yeah.
The nurse is handing the baby to, I don't know, a plague doctor, like witch doctor, like a plague doctor and a witch doctor had a baby.
Yeah.
So she brings this baby to like this secret lab. There's this other monster that like cleans up the lab. And then she basically squishes the baby, makes like a potion that turns into a block that turns into like dust. And then she throws the dust in the air, and then she sees, it looks like the past. And it looks like the first bomb that they set that actually like blew up the city and started the war that killed all the people.
Right.
So started this whole thing, and then that's it.
Yes.
That's the end. Like I said, this is purely visual. Like, I mean,
yes.
Again, I'm describing what happens, but you really have to see it to know what's going on.
Yeah, it's a visual story, so you have to glean a lot of it,
right,
yourself. So what were your first thoughts? I know you said you watched the first Mad God 1 a lot.
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah, I watched it several times. Like, I thought it was just awesome. You know, because it was like I loved Phil Tippett, but I never quite saw this, like, I don't want to call it unhinged, but like unleashed, right? Like he gets to make like whatever dark, mature shit that he wants, because I'm sure he was never able to really do that.
Oh no, this would get a hard R, or
right.
I mean, in the 80s, probably an X-ray just for the amount of gore.
Right. Yeah. But it's also like, you know, disturbing subject matter.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, but it's something that, you know, it's undeniably Phil Tippett, right? I mean, it's stop motion animation. You can tell that it is. It's extremely well done.
Yes.
But again, that's Phil Tippett. He's the master of his craft, right?
Yeah.
But it looks great. It's undeniably, you know, stop motion animation Phil Tippett. But yeah, it's dark. It's, you know, not only atmospherically, but like literally dark, and it's disturbing and all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's if you like stop motion animation and you like Phil Tippett, you definitely have to see it.
Yeah, for sure. I was watching it. The wife was kind of watching a little bit too. She's like, "What is going on here?" I'm like, "Well, you know, gore and blood and guts and all that stuff." You know, I obviously I knew about this through you, because we talked about it many times before about Mad God, and I don't see many people talking about this movie. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just the stop motion part of it. If they think it's stop motion and Phil Tippett, therefore it's going to be kid-like or for kids. It's definitely not.
Well, I mean, it's a Shudder exclusive. So like, if you're watching it on Shudder, I don't think anyone's going to think it's a kid thing. But I mean, again, it's stop motion animation. Most people are, you know, again, it's like people that appreciate stop motion animation are not, you know, the mainstream people that would be shouting it. Right.
Right.
They're not the social media type people. They're not, you know, YouTube podcast type people normally.
Right. But no, I'm like, I was, like I said, I from what I talked to you about this before in the past and stuff like that, and just like I've seen like one person talk about it, and like this is no one can do it justice in words. And
yeah, no,
that's why
it's fantastic. It really is. It really is great.
yeah, and so and this is my first watch through of it, and I just go, this is something you can watch multiple times because there is so much depth and detail and world building from this movie. Because usually you think of stop motion like, okay, there's a couple of trees in the background, it's a pretty wide open space, right, that you can do multiple things in, but like the amount of crap he jammed into this visuals is astounding.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of like weird little cameos too. If you look for them. Like when he's looking through the binoculars out over the thing, you can see like there's Robbie the robot, there's RoboCop, there's like all the like a lot of probably things that he had laying around in his
right.
studio, and he probably just threw them all in a big pile. I mean, obviously to give a shout out to those other things that he's worked on, but yeah, there's a lot of detail there.
Yeah, and we'll get into that, but yeah, I thought this was amazing for the first watch. What are your highlights?
The highlights here, I mean, really, this is the peak art of stop motion. I mean, really, like pure stop motion. This is it. this is where we get to. I mean, there are some weird, like human acted parts, but the way that they're filmed, they're almost filmed in also stop motion animation, right?
Yes.
So like when they're moving, it still looks like stop motion animation. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they had some kind of camera tricks to do that, but it's very interesting.
If you drop the frame rate down to like 57, it is not as smooth, so you get that little bit of motion blur with it.
Yeah, no, it was definitely it's cool the way that they did. I mean, just the design of a lot of those characters are really cool. I especially like the assassin design. I mean, they're just super cool. I mean, you wonder how small those puppets are, right? And they still make them look that cool, right? They had to like make all those little clothes and his little leather jacket and his little helmet. Like they had to make all that stuff, and it's like it looks super cool. I like it a lot. And the atmosphere of it. I mean, the whole atmosphere of the thing is just like grim dark, right? It's like there's really nothing good in this whole like thing. I think we get one tiny little scene of like a wonderland that quickly ends with a giant spider eating thing.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's just if you like stop motion at all, you will definitely like this. It's like I said, it's that peak of the medium for sure.
For sure.
What do you got?
Oh yeah, like if you were to envision 7 levels of hell, like the assassin goes to them, right? It you have giant things being electrocuted in the brain and just shitting out, right? And just starting that process and feeding it, and then those things being squished and then scooped up and turning into shitmen, and shitmen just getting run over all, Mr. Bill style, and they're just piled into just a landfill, and the process starts all over again. I said, I imagine these being about a foot to a foot and a half tall. Because that's the only way you're gonna get that much detail and movement out of it. The fluidity of everything was like perfect, because usually like stop motion, you can see when someone grabs something, they have a piece of clothing, you see the wrinkles in the clothing of that frame. You just see like weird pieces and dents appear. You don't see that in this movie. It is smooth and fluid the entire way through.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is definitely a passion project, and you can really feel that. For sure.
Yeah. And just to not have that crinkle effect, it has to take so much more time. Way too much time to do it.
Well, I mean, technically, 1987 to 2022 that's a lot of years. So yeah.
Yeah. I said, and just the landscape is beautifully done. It's deep. It is deep in it. And I feel like he does have some robotics in there too, like the lights that were moving, that felt very like connector esque to me. You know what I mean? Like not stop motion for the lights, because lights are hard to do without just being different colors across it. So there's definitely lights on there. Definitely fire was actually being used on the screen.
Right.
And yeah, he had some of the humans, but like the eyeballs that were shot were human. The eyeballs were human, which was interesting.
A lot of them were, yeah. Some of
Yeah.
them were not, but most of them were, yeah.
But most of them were, yeah. And like the draw, to do that, this is essentially a rinse and repeat thing. Like I said, I can keep comparing it to Hell. It's like trying to do the same thing over and over and over. And when you see the second part of the assassin being, taken apart, you go and like zoom out, and it's like the cube almost of different operating rooms where it's been happening nonstop.
Right.
So I love that, and I love the storytelling of it, and I can see this, like, that world getting made into like a video game would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be. I don't know who would make it or when, but yeah, sure.
I mean, maybe not stop motion, but that world itself, and trying to be the assassin would be a great horror game.
Yeah.
I'll roll into my low points. Obviously, shit, man. And what the blob creatures with just hanging tits and dragging ass, literally. I mean, they are gruesome creatures, and disturbing. And like how far they're reach into the assassin, like these people doing the work like shoulder deep into a guy that's not that deep and just keeps pulling out stuff. And that was like, it's so great. It looks like actual body horror to me. It looks like a David Cronenberg did stop motion autopsy scene.
Right.
But it's that gruesome and great. I mean, is that low point? Just, it's gross, yes, but I don't really have any low points. So, what about you?
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree with the shit, man. Not a big fan of the shit. They're just gross. And then the damn baby crying. Like,
I mean, yeah.
dear God, that scene went on for too long. It's like, just shut up. And then they put it on the thing and squished it. I was like, really? All that crying and that's all you're gonna do? Why don't you just snap its neck from the beginning so it didn't have to cry the whole time? But yeah, I guess you feel worse about it, whatever. And then of course, the very beginning of it, the Old Testament God, right?
Leviticus, yeah.
Like how jealous and angry and mean the Old Testament God really is. I mean, obviously pulled the best quote from the Bible for the beginning part of it. That was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
But again, low point because it is a mad God.
Yes. Leviticus. All right. So, how many gross puppets out of 10 do you give this movie?
I mean, I'm kind of biased, but 9.5. 9.5 gross puppets out of 10.
What would it take it to make it the full 10?
No baby crying.
No, I'm right here with you. I'm saying 9.5 as well, just because I wish I didn't take. I mean, it's only been a couple of years, but to not know about this sooner.
I told you about it as soon as it came out. I told you.
But yeah, like this is a hidden gem that people are not talking enough about. So we both highly recommend seeing this.
Yes.
All right. Last up, we have the movie that prompted this episode was stop motion.
Right. Well, yeah, this one, I guess we should preface it. Yeah, there is stop motion in the movie for sure. The whole movie is not stop motion.
Correct.
Like most of the movie is normal acting. And then I would say maybe 10-20% is stop motion.
I mean, it also depends on how you view the ending.
Yeah, I guess.
So essentially, like I said, we'll just kind of go into the highlights. I mean, yeah, it is people. But essentially it is a daughter who is working with her mother on a stop motion movie, and you're seeing kind of how the scenes are played out. There's, a Cyclops that runs into like a clone of itself. I don't know the whole story about that Cyclops because it doesn't really matter to the movie.
Well, they do tell it later if you actually want to know. They essentially what it was is the Cyclops gave its eye to Destiny to be able to see the future, and it showed its own death. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
Yeah. So essentially we're introduced to I don't remember her name anymore.
I don't think they ever say her name.
I don't.
Oh no, Ellen or Ella.
Yeah, Ella.
Something like that.
So yeah, her mother is clearly a perfectionist with the craft, right? You're like millimeter, 2 millimeter, and while screaming at her child has a stroke.
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, I guess you should also say that she has arthritis. She's a famous stop motion animator that has arthritis, so she can't actually do the animation part of it anymore. So she's directing her daughter to do it for her. Her daughter is also very good at it, but of course, she's directing her with an iron fist kind of thing.
Well, her mother was like the pinnacle of stop motion.
Right.
So anyway, she has a stroke, and she eventually, moves into, I guess, her own studio, if you will, to finish her mother's movie. While she's doing this, we introduced to Tom, the boyfriend, his sister who works in stop motion as well. All this jazz is going on, but she is working on her movie, and a little girl comes in, pretty much just barges into her room. It's like, what are you doing? And just like, oh, this movie is shit. Right? I have a better story. And he's like, oh, it's gonna be about a girl being chased by something. Yes. So she kind of just like, you know what? This sounds like a great story. I'm going to start this. And she makes kind of just I think it's just the girl, isn't it?
Yeah, the first scene that she does, it's just the girl and then a shadow following.
Yeah. But she makes the girl out of mortician's wax, which is what they put on cadavers to kind of sculpt their skin to look the way you want. But anyway, the little girl goes, oh, that's not right. You need to, do this. And she kind of makes like a meat puppet and puts the mortician's wax over to make it look more realistic. So she started working on that movie, and Tom, her boyfriend, is like, hey, you are not okay. You're starting to, dive head first into this work because you're actually trying to make the movie for your mother, and you're just getting too lost in it. You're not sleeping right. Let my sisters and take you out to maybe help you think of other things and kind of help you relax. So they go to a club, and good old dance party going on there, and she gets ecstasy, right?
Acid.
So she goes on an acid trip to help her come up with good ideas. Where while on this, she seems to have sex with her boyfriend, kind of starts like trying to mold his skin like she would, the mortician's wax. And then she sees the little girl there, and she's like, oh, that's weird. And then ends up like, they find her passed out somewhere, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, she passed out at home. And she did that the first time too, to where she woke up and she didn't remember doing it. So yeah, she just did that the second time. Right.
So like, okay, you need to kind of relax a little bit about this. And the sister comes by, it's like, hey, you should come. She sees stuff like, oh, what you're working on. Hey, you should come by here and just help out my studio. We need an extra pair of hands because, you're not Phil Tippett. You can't just do it by yourself.
Well, even Phil Tippett can't do it by himself.
I know, but she was trying to do the entire movie by herself. So that's a lot of work trying to do a stop motion movie by yourself. So I think she says no at first. She tells her boyfriend, hey, don't tell your sister that. I don't want to go there. And so she works with the little girl to tell her a little bit more of the story. He's like, oh, the first night, the girl runs into a house, a bungalow, I think she called it, and it knocks, and it sees her, and we find out it's the Ash Man, who's made out of meat and ash, essentially.
Dead, like a dead
fox.
Yeah, dead roadkill.
Yeah, roadkill. Yeah, because something that was bleeding is more realistic, according to this weird little girl.
Right.
So they're kind of working on it, and she kind of starts to see the Ash Man in real life. The first night it sees her, and she sees it. And we start seeing this downhill spiral of her sanity. The second night, it touches her, and she's like, no, I don't want it to touch her. I'm like, oh, that's the story. Too bad. so she kind of shoots it, and then she gets visited by the Ashman, and it kind of like molds her leg a little bit, like peeling apart, like her leg is made out of mortician's wax. She kind of passes out, wakes up in the hospital, and like, okay,
she does that in the shower to herself later. The Ashman touches her face and then spits out a big black egg, and then she eats it.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, she does that to her leg. You're right. And then Tom's like, okay, this has got to stop. Like, you are losing it. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. You're not okay. But she's like, no, I'm not going to destroy it. And she's like, okay, well, we'll go together. And then she kind of escapes the hospital after her mother dies. After her mom's like, hey, isn't it great making dead things alive? And it's like hallucination, it seems like. And the little girl appears at the hospital. And then, yeah, she comes back home, and the little girl's like, okay, we're going to finish this. But she snaps and starts choking the little girl to death. And then she just appears behind her like, okay, is that out of your system? Like, okay, something's really wrong with this girl. And then she is convinced to, I don't remember what the third night happens. What's the Ashman do the third night?
They never actually say. She just says, shoot it and you'll find out.
Yeah.
And
but she digs into her own leg that was, stitched up, and pulls out flesh, adds it to her movie. And she sees this, and then Tom and his sister come in there. She's like, okay, you are not okay. And then she goes and attacks and kills him, and then makes bigger size versions of the girl and the Ashman to film it. And she's filming it, and then she kind of collapses from blood loss, and then we see that she is then in the house where the Ashman is, and the little girl seems to be watching the movie of her bleeding out and dying, and then she goes into a puppet case. End of movie.
Yep.
First thoughts for me is, the trailer looked interesting because we see some stop motion going with the live people, which, classic, 60s, 70s, and 80s type deal. Which was really intriguing to me. And this movie is dark and disturbing, and kind of shows the madness of the passion of stop motion. We'll get into probably that low point a little bit later of it. Overall, though, I thought this was a pretty interesting movie. Just kind of like another artist descending into madness over their work. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. Did you use your whole, if a character shows up and they don't say their name, do you immediately know it's a younger version of themselves? He said, this is the rule you told me about, that you knew everything that was going to happen at Old Man last time.
I know. I mean, I had hints of it. I mean, I definitely could have thought this was just a younger version of herself being the perfectionist, and her just carrying on the legacy like her mom, essentially.
Well, I think it was. I mean, yeah. I mean, essentially, what I think it was is that the little girl signifies her creativity, which was stunted by her mother.
Right.
Her mother kept telling her that her ideas weren't good enough, as you can tell, because her mother asked her, well, what ideas do you have? And she couldn't even bring herself to say it, because I'm guessing because she's been shot down so many times.
Right.
So yeah, her own creativity's been stunted. So when her mother's finally gone and she has her own creativity, it's still in a childlike state. And then her, creativity explodes out to the point where she can't control it, to where she gets so crazy into it that she literally starts carving herself up to be a part of it.
Right.
Which is, unfortunate, but I mean, it's like the it's like the Ed Gein syndrome, right? You cannot put your children in that, crazy servile state and then not let them do anything without you. You have to give them some freedom.
Right.
And yeah, that's essentially what happened.
Yeah.
Like a Norman Bates situation.
Right. I'll go to my highlights first. I think this was I think the stop motion of this was spectacular. It was smooth. They actually did use stop motion. I was concerned that it's going to be like, CGI, but it really wasn't. So that was great. And it's nice to kind of see the madness to the method of this art craft, right? That people do dive wholeheartedly into it, and it's perfectionist and everything like that. I think it was a good amount of body horror and creepiness with the puppets too, and an interesting story with it as a whole, and very open to interpretation at some parts of it too. It's not really spelling everything out for you, slapping you across the face with it.
Right.
What about you?
I mean, I thought that what stop motion there was very cool. I mean, it's very weird with the meat being part of it, but it was still looked interesting, right? It was kind of like, like that dark atmosphere that, kind of, like that weird, for whatever reason, adult stop motion animation always has that really dark, morbid atmosphere, and it really sold that. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, the meat dolls were interesting for sure. I mean, I mean, if you told me that I was watching stop motion animation made with meat dolls that were from Roadkill, I mean, I would be interested. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's messed up. I don't have to smell it, so yeah, of course I want to watch it.
Right.
But I thought the blood, the effects, like the body horror that they had, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the, I guess, like stop motion stuff that was when the Ashman was bigger, I don't think he was nearly as scary as he was when he was little.
Well, he was also very shrouded in darkness too.
Right. What I was just saying, like when he was big, he kind of looked a little cartoony.
Yeah.
Rather than when he was small, he looked more evil, I guess. But yeah. But that's my high points. You want me to go to my?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, kids, you don't need drugs to be creative. So many people do like, oh, I can't create anything unless I'm fucked up on something. Like, you don't need drugs to be creative. Don't let people tell you that shit. I mean, as you see in this movie, she didn't even take the drugs. She's just crazy.
Right.
It's like in the morning when she wakes up on the floor, he was like, "Oh, what did she give you?" Like, she said she gave you something to like help, and she's like, "I didn't even take it." And she takes out the little package that the acid was still in. Like, she never took it.
She's just sleep deprived.
Yeah, she's just crazy. That's all. I mean, this sister is just a horrible person.
To steal her movie,
right? I mean, like, what are you thinking? And like, I mean, not only did she just steal the idea, that's one thing. If it was like really similar, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is a thing I did on my own. No, there's literally pictures of her stuff up on the wall. Like, that is clearly theft. Like, how is that anyone at that company okay with that? You can't.
I made your movie, but better.
Right. Like,
yeah.
And she was talking about it in front of the director. He was totally aware that this is what happened.
Yep.
Like, what kind of, like, piece of shit people are they? Like, wow, dude.
Here, you can make 30 eyeballs or 100 eyeballs that are for your movie that you're not making.
Right. It's like, the fuck? And now again, the boyfriend, like, oh yeah, he's supposed to be like sweet and nice and everything, but like when he's like, oh, you have to stop this. I'm gonna go to your house and destroy everything. What fucking right does he have to destroy her art?
Right.
Like, that's her shit, dude. You can't just, oh, I'm gonna go and take it upon myself to destroy your art because I don't think it's good for you. Get the fuck out of here, man. Who the hell do you think you are? You know how angry I would fucking be if somebody's like, oh, you're too into this video game, I'm gonna go destroy it. I would fucking kill people. Like, no, that's not okay. Not okay at all. But yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, I guess I really didn't mention that in the recap that they stole it from her and she destroyed it, rightfully so. Like, destroyed their set. Like, fuck you guys.
Well, yeah, but seriously, they had her pictures, like pictures of her shit that she did on the wall.
Yeah,
like, how, like, the company should know that this is like, they're liable. Like,
yes.
like again, if you didn't have any of those pictures and you're saying this is your own thing, like that's one thing. You just stole the idea, but nobody, it's going to take a lot of work to prove that. But like if you literally have pictures of her shit on your wall, like you're screwed.
Right. For sure.
Bizarre.
Yeah, for me, obviously the just overbearing parent. Like I had one of those. I don't appreciate it. Obviously you're supposed to not like her, and they did a great job of it, but yeah, like that just perfectionism is just absurd sometimes. And I get it to a point. Yeah, and you're right. The boyfriend is going, yeah, I'm just gonna destroy your shit. So you can make movies for my videos for my music videos. What, like, you go to work in a suit and tie. What videos? What music are you doing?
Right.
I don't know if we ever got an answer for that.
Well, no, you can tell that he was extremely offended by that, right?
Yeah.
He's like, oh well, you can do my music videos when my album takes off, and she's like, you're not a musician. You put on a
Right.
suit and go to work, and you can see that dagger stabbing him in the heart, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
He's like, fuck you.
It's exactly what he said.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like, but I mean, that hurts. Like, again, you're not a touring musician. You're a
Right.
corporate musician. It's very, very different.
She is in her element, her artwork the entire time. That's her job.
Right. Well,
yeah.
It's artistry is different people get different levels
Right.
of elitist when it comes down to it, shit like that. I mean, if you're creating art, you're creating art. I mean, yeah, some people have to do it to make money. Some people, yeah. Again, there's selling out and all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of layers to it. Whatever.
Right.
If you like it, you like it.
Yeah. But I agree though. The Ash Man, like, he looked like, how do I say this nicely? He looked like he belonged in a Resident Evil movie. You know what I mean? Like, he looked like a bad nemesis.
Yeah.
A bit to me. And he was in the dark a lot. When the smaller version really wasn't. I really wanted to see like a good up close version of him that looked great. I don't think we got that.
Well, I think that's on purpose.
Yeah. And then she was able to work with the little girl in a couple hours and have like 30 seconds of movie.
Right. Yeah,
That's impossible.
Right.
I mean, I guess, of course, the little girl was in her head and she was probably working for days, but still, you're still not going to get that in a day or two. No matter how good you are. As you pointed out earlier, that they kind of just oversimplified how easy it is. They said, show how easy it is to, quote, do stop motion. It's probably not that easy.
No, it's definitely not. I've seen, like, because I was kind of, I guess I still am obsessed with stop motion and like how it's done and the process. So I've watched a lot of behind the scenes stuff for that shit. And yeah, it, like I said, I can't remember the calculation, but they have a calculation to where it's like for every month you have like a minute of footage or something like that. So that's like, how long was her thing?
A while.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, it was a couple of minutes long. That means like at the very least it would have taken months.
Right.
And they basically pretend like it's taking her days.
Yeah. Which is absurd.
For the purpose of the film, to keep the film moving along, it's fine. Just in real life, obviously it's a lot harder than that, kids.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, that's all I got for low points. So it was an interesting movie, to say the least. It probably will watch it again, quite honestly. So that gets into our number of gross puppets out of 10. Yeah, I mean, it's no Mad God level, but it's still pretty interesting. So I will give this, let's say 7.25. gross puppets out of 10. Like I said, I will rewatch this again, just to see if I can catch anything else on the rewatch, because you don't know really about the little girl from the beginning. You have some hints, but not too much of a hint.
Right.
What about you?
I'll go 7.5. 7.5 gross puppets out of 10. I thought it was fun. It was interesting. Like I said, I did like, the whole, is it real? Is it not real? Like what's going on? Like what is really happening? I liked the whole thing. I think it was done well. I'd watch it again for sure.
Yeah. I think the wife watched enough of it that she wants to watch again. So I will definitely do that. All right. Anything else for this episode?
Nope.
No, I think it was a good introduction to an art style that we really haven't done before. And maybe we'll do another one at some point. If you think of other art styles. So, all right. Well, oh, bother. What big eyes do you have? And never trust a German house made out of candy. The honey-loving bear is back, and this time he's starting a whole new childhood-ruined universe. I think they're calling it the Pooh-verse, if you will. So he's going to be teaming forces with Bambi and Peter Pan and all this stuff. So join us as we continue to ruin our childhood with Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, Hansel and Gretel, and Red Riding Hood as we go into more ruined childhoods. This is an interesting sub-genre. As more public domain happens, we're going to see more and more of these. Because we're going to have Mickey's Mousetrap at some point in time.
I can't wait for Snow White.
I know, right? All right. So remember, we watch bad movies, so you don't have to. And this has been Graveyard saying, have you checked on the children?
This is Salem saying, long live the new flesh.
Good night.